Holy men once perfected the art of deception. This video reveals 23 bizarre disguises that allowed monastic spies to outwit the most suspicious enemy, Watchmen. You will discover the hidden history of pious agents who used faith as a weapon, blending seamlessly into the medieval world to gather crucial intelligence. How did a simple pilgrim's robe conceal a master operative? What strange tools did a chanting monk use to pass secrets? We are about to uncover their most ingenious methods. What does it truly mean to hide in plain sight? The quiet of the monastery library often masked a world of secrets. In an age where parchment was more valuable than gold, these religious houses became unexpected nerve centers for intelligence. Kings and popes soon realized that the humble monk, with his vow of poverty and unwavering devotion, was the perfect agent who would suspect a man of God of carrying sensitive messages or sketching a rival lord's fortifications. Their very piety was their greatest camouflage. Pilgrimages provided the ideal excuse for travel, allowing these agents to cross borders and enter enemy courts without raising an alarm. They moved through the world unseen, not by hiding in shadows, but by standing openly in the light of faith. This powerful paradox set the stage for disguises of breathtaking audacity. The first disguise was perhaps the most effective because it required no costume at all, just a profound understanding of human nature. It was the simple pilgrim, a figure so common he was practically invisible. A mendicant pilgrim's tattered cloak was the ultimate suit of stealth. These agents would wander the dusty roads, a staff in hand and a beggar's scrip at their belt, presenting an image of holy poverty that disarmed all suspicion. Their entire performance was a masterclass in deception. While publicly asking for alms or prayers, their true mission unfolded in the shadows of their own performance. They would note the strength of a gatehouse, count the number of guards on a wall, and memorize the rhythms of a patrol, all while bowing their head in feigned humility. Their ragged robes, often infested with lice, were a calculated part of the disguise, making them appear harmless and beneath notice. Historical records even tell of how these false pilgrims used popular shrines as dead drops, leaving behind seemingly innocent prayer tokens that were, in fact, intricate coded messages for fellow agents. The very roads built for faith became their intelligence network. But while the pilgrim relied on humble anonymity, another disguise leveraged the immense power of perceived intellect. While the pilgrim mastered the art of invisibility, the itinerant scribe weaponized the power of trust. A monastic spy posing as a scribe would arrive at a castle gate, his satchel filled with quills, ink, and parchment, offering his rare and valuable skill to a lord or garrison commander. In an era where few could read or write, his literacy was an immediate ticket past the guards, welcomed not as a stranger but as a useful asset. He was given a quiet corner in the Great Hall or even the Lord's own solar, places where sensitive conversations flowed as freely as the wine. While his hands were busy meticulously copying a religious text or composing a seemingly innocent letter, his ears were capturing every word of strategic discussions, troop movements, and supply line concerns. His true work happened between the lines of his official task, as he secretly documented the castle's layout, the thickness of its walls, and the location of its postern gates on tiny, concealed scraps of vellum. Some of these agent scribes took deception a step further, expertly forging documents that would mislead enemy forces or sow discord among rival factions. There are accounts of monks who would deliberately leave a folio of their work behind in an enemy camp, only to return later to retrieve it. In that brief interval, the abandoned notes, which appeared to be simple hymns or philosophical musings, would be collected by a fellow agent who had added vital intelligence in a secret ink between the lines. The scribe's quill, it turned out, was indeed far mightier than the sword, carving out victories not on the battlefield, but in the silent, ink-stained shadows of a scriptorium. This reliance on trusted professions did not end with the written word. Another disguise would soon emerge, one that traded the scribe's quiet authority for the urgent, life-saving power of the healer. A healer's gentle hands could open doors that a soldier's sword could never breach. Monastic spies who took on the role of herbalist healers wielded a different kind of authority, one born of compassion and necessity. Arriving at a garrison or a besieged castle, they presented themselves as men of mercy, their satchels overflowing with fragrant herbs and mysterious tinctures. They offered relief from fevers, salves for festering wounds, and potions for common ailments, quickly earning the trust and gratitude of everyone from the lowliest guard to the commanding knight. This trust was the key that unlocked every gate. While treating a commander's persistent cough, a healer could learn of supply shortages affecting morale. While cleaning and binding a soldier's wound, he would hear whispered complaints about the strength of the enemy's forces or the poor condition of the fortifications. Their work provided a perfect excuse to move freely through a camp, observing everything from the number of able-bodied fighters to the location of the armory and food stores. Those very satchels, which seemed to hold only the bounty of nature, were marvels of clandestine engineering. False bottoms and cleverly stitched secret compartments concealed meticulously drawn maps on thin vellum or tiny, coded messages written in invisible ink. Perhaps their most cunning tactic was using their medical authority to actively shape the battlefield. Historical accounts describe how these agent healers would diagnose key sentries with exhaustion or a minor ailment, strongly prescribing a full night's rest. With the most vigilant watchmen deliberately removed from their posts, a critical vulnerability was created, allowing for a surprise attack or the undetected passage of a spy. This disguise was a masterful blend of genuine care and calculated deception, where saving a life and compromising a defense could be part of the very same mission. Such strategic use of perceived piety did not end with the healer's art. Another disguise would soon emerge, one that turned public devotion into a powerful tool for observation. A man scourging his own flesh in the town square commanded a strange and fearful kind of respect. In an age terrified by plague and war, the public spectacle of the Penitent Flagellant was a horrifyingly effective disguise. These monastic agents would join the roaming bands of zealots who believed that self-punishment could appease a wrathful god, their bodies a canvas of bloody stripes. The very extremity of their performance made them untouchable, surrounded by a mix of awe and revulsion that parted crowds like a Moses of misery. Watchmen stationed at city gates, often superstitious men themselves, were deeply reluctant to interfere with such a potent display of faith, fearing divine retribution more than any earthly threat. This allowed the spy to pass through the most heavily guarded checkpoints without a single question, his true mission hidden behind a mask of fanatical piety. The rhythmic, collective chanting of the Flagellant Brotherhood provided perfect acoustic cover. Amid the cacophony of wails and the crack of whips, a spy could lean toward a contact in the crowd and whisper a vital piece of intelligence, the exchange seen by all but understood by none. Historical chronicles suggest that entire flagellant groups were sometimes infiltrated or even created by intelligence networks, using the chaotic religious fervor as a smokescreen to gather information on rival lords or to assess the morale of a populace on the brink of rebellion. The sheer physical commitment required for this role was staggering, a testament to the lengths these agents would go to for their cause. They did not merely pretend to be flagellants, they endured the pain and exhaustion, their suffering making the deception utterly convincing. This willingness to fully inhabit a role, to bleed for the mission, set a new standard for undercover work, but not all disguises demanded such physical sacrifice. The next form of deception relied not on pain, but on pure, captivating performance. A lute could carry a secret as easily as a melody. The traveling minstrel was a master of this dual purpose, a figure whose joyous art provided the perfect camouflage for espionage. Welcomed in every great hall and humble tavern, these monastic agents used their musical talents to bypass borders and charm their way into the confidence of nobles and soldiers alike. Their performances were not merely entertainment, they were intricate intelligence-gathering operations. While singing a ballad about a legendary battle or a tragic romance, the minstrel spy would be carefully observing the entire room, noting who spoke to whom, the condition of the soldier's armor, and the subtle tensions within the Lord's court. Their own songs were often the vehicle for coded messages. A verse about a fox in the henhouse might signal an enemy scout's position, while a refrain concerning a coming storm could warn of an impending attack. These coded ballads would be learned by other agents in the audience and carried forth, spreading vital intelligence through the simple act of song. The minstrel's instruments themselves were marvels of clandestine design. Lutes and harps were constructed with hidden compartments in their sound boxes, perfect for concealing thin vellum maps or tiny scrolls of coded information. A spy could openly carry his instrument through any checkpoint, its true cargo safely stowed away from prying eyes. There are accounts of minstrels who performed for hours in a rival lord's castle, not for payment, but for the opportunity to commit the entire floor plan to memory. Every corridor, every staircase, and every potential weak point was mentally recorded, the layout later transcribed from memory in a safe house far away. This artistic cover was brilliantly effective because it offered something of value, disarming suspicion through the pure, universal language of music. The minstrel's role demonstrated that the most powerful disguise was often one that people genuinely wanted to see. After the last note faded, another kind of respected traveler would arrive, one who traded the lute for the weighty authority of a book. Even the stars could be recruited into the service of espionage. A monastic spy posing as an astrologer would present himself at a noble's court, his arms laden with intricate brass astrolabes and scrolls of celestial charts. In an age where leaders looked to the heavens for guidance on everything from the right day to wage war to the success of the next harvest, this supposed scholar of the cosmos was granted an audience and a level of trust few others could command. His props were not merely for show, they were brilliant tools of his trade. While a lord peered over his shoulder at a drawn constellation, the spy's true focus was on the fortress layout visible from the high window, mentally mapping the positions of towers and the patrol routes of the watchmen below. His predictions, delivered with solemn authority, were often clever vehicles for intelligence gathered from other agents in the field. A warning about Mars aligning unfavorably for a campaign in the north might actually be a coded message about a weakened enemy garrison there, steering the Lord's military decisions without ever revealing the source. Historical chronicles recount instances where these astrological advisors famously foretold an ambush on a rival lord's supply train, a prediction that was only possible because they had helped orchestrate the attack themselves. By blending the emerging science of astronomy with pure subterfuge, these agents did not just observe events, they actively shaped them, manipulating superstitious commanders from the privileged shadows of their own courts. Yet for every spy who operated in the rarefied air of nobility, another found that true invisibility lay not in lofty predictions, but in the grime and sweat of unquestioned labor. The strength of a common porter made for a surprisingly effective cloak. Monastic spies who adopted this role immersed themselves in the gritty world of manual labor, their muscles straining under sacks of grain and heavy crates. Dressed in rough, sweat-stained tunics and moving with the weary gait of men accustomed to backbreaking work, they became part of the scenery, utterly beneath the notice of the knights and nobles who passed them by. This was a disguise built on pure physicality, where the very act of labor provided the perfect cover for clandestine activities. Those heavy barrels and woven baskets they hauled between monasteries and towns were rarely as simple as they appeared. A hollowed-out space within a cask of wine could conceal a tightly rolled vellum map, while a false bottom in a grain sack might hide a small arsenal of daggers destined for a sympathetic contact. Their constant, sanctioned movement made them ideal couriers, transporting secrets in plain sight under the weight of everyday commerce. A porter's universal access was his greatest asset. He could wander freely through storerooms where idle soldiers gossiped, or linger in stables where officers discussed troop movements just out of earshot. No one thought to lower their voice around the man stacking firewood. There are documented cases of these agent porters deliberately fumbling a heavy load, sending a crate of pottery shattering onto the cobblestones. While guards rushed to see the commotion and the owner of the goods lamented his loss, another spy would slip through an unguarded gate or retrieve a hidden message from a pre-arranged hiding spot. The distraction was chaotic, believable, and brilliantly effective. This low-profile role was the essence of observational espionage, proving that sometimes the most valuable eyes and ears belonged to those everyone else had been trained to ignore. But while the porter moved through the earthly realm of goods and stables, another disguise would soon emerge from the ethereal world of sacred objects, wielding the power of faith itself as the ultimate tool of deception. A sacred relic could sanctify the most worldly of secrets. The eighth disguise, that of the Relic Bearer, turned profound public faith into a private intelligence network. These monastic agents would journey from town to town, their hands carefully cradling ornate, locked chests said to contain the finger bone of a saint or a splinter from the true cross. The aura of holiness surrounding these objects was so powerful that it created an invisible shield. Watchmen at city gates and castle drawbridges, often deeply superstitious men, would hesitate to demand the chest be opened. To pry into a holy reliquary was to risk divine wrath, a fear that these spies expertly cultivated and exploited. Inside those gilded containers, nestled carefully beside a yellowed bone or a scrap of faded cloth, lay the true cargo, meticulously drawn maps on thin vellum, coded dispatches, or even small, concealable weapons. The Relic Bearer's public role was a masterful performance of piety. He would stand in a village square or monastery courtyard, preaching to a captivated crowd about the miracles associated with the sacred object. He spoke of healing and divine intervention, all while his sharp eyes scanned the faces in the crowd, identifying potential contacts or noting the demeanor and equipment of any soldiers present. The pilgrims who came to venerate the relic provided a perfect source of intelligence, as they often carried news from distant regions, gossiping freely in the presence of the holy man. Historical records describe entire relic processions that were secretly rerouted, their solemn pace and chanting masking a deliberate journey to a prearranged spy rendezvous point in a secluded forest or a sympathetic monastery. One famous account tells of a relic bearer who spent 3 days in a rival baron's castle, his holy charge drawing every local noble to pay their respects. During that time, he not only memorized the castle's defenses, but also collected crucial information from the loose-tongued guests, all under the sacred and unsuspected cover of his divine mission. This disguise weaponized reverence itself, proving that in the right hands, a box of bones could be more effective than a battalion of knights. When faith provided such powerful cover, it was only a matter of time before spies learned to exploit even the most desperate human circumstances. A desperate hunger can make a population blind to anything but the promise of a meal. The ninth disguise, that of the famine relief monk, weaponized this very desperation. During sieges or poor harvests, when a castle or town was cut off and starving, these agents would arrive with carts laden with bread and grain, presenting themselves as humble brothers on a mission of mercy. Their arrival was met not with suspicion but with tearful gratitude, a reaction that instantly disarmed even the most cautious watchman, who would dare turn away a man bearing the gift of life. This humanitarian cover granted them unparalleled access to the heart of the enemy's suffering. While distributing food to gaunt-faced civilians and weary soldiers, the spy monk was conducting a critical assessment. He noted the hollow cheeks and listless movements, calculating how long the defenders could possibly hold out. He observed which storerooms were empty and which, if any, still had supplies, gauging the true state of the siege from the inside. Those very sacks of grain and barrels of flour were integral to the mission. Some sacks had false bottoms, concealing not more food, but tightly rolled maps or coded dispatches meant for sympathizers within the walls. Others hid small, specialized tools perfectly sized for sabotage, like files to weaken sword blades or awls to puncture water skins. The trust they earned was their most powerful tool. Guards who might have challenged a wandering minstrel or a relic bearer would instead help unload the monk's cart, their vigilance eroded by the sight of full bellies and renewed hope. Some historical accounts even suggest these agents engaged in a more subtle form of warfare, feeding misinformation to enemy scouts who came to observe the relief efforts. A monk might casually lament to a listening guard that a rival lord's forces were also suffering from a mysterious illness, or that a relief convoy from a different region had been ambushed, sowing seeds of doubt and despair that could cripple morale as effectively as any weapon. This disguise was a chillingly effective blend of genuine compassion and ruthless strategy, turning the act of charity into a decisive advantage. Yet for all its cunning, this method still required the spy to walk openly among men. The next form of infiltration required no human contact at all, instead mimicking the silent, unseen movements of the natural world. A nobleman's passion for falconry opened every door. The 10th disguise saw monastic spies adopt the prestigious and solitary art of the falconer, a role that granted them the perfect excuse to roam the wild fields and dense forests skirting enemy territory. With a magnificent hawk or falcon perched regally on their leather gauntleted arm, these agents presented an image of aristocratic leisure, a pastime so respected it disarmed all suspicion. Their very presence in a landscape was justified, even welcomed by the local nobility who shared their interest. The tools of their trade became tools of espionage. Intricately carved wooden lures used to call the bird back from a hunt were sometimes hollowed out to conceal a tiny, tightly rolled vellum scroll. The small, polished bells attached to the bird's jesses could be crafted with one silent side, a prearranged signal to a watching contact that a message was ready for retrieval. The birds themselves were the most reliable couriers. A well-trained falcon could be released to fly a predetermined path to a specific window or glove miles away, carrying a minute capsule attached to its leg containing vital intelligence, a method far faster and more secure than any human runner could manage. This cover provided unparalleled access to powerful individuals. A lord would often invite a skilled falconer to his private chambers to discuss the finer points of avian training, creating an opportunity for the spy to engage in hushed, strategic conversations away from eavesdroppers. There are documented instances where these agent falconers deliberately allowed their bird to stray over a restricted castle's outer walls or a fortified encampment. While the nobleman fretted over his prized possession, the spy would calmly track its flight, his eyes secretly mapping every defensive tower, gatehouse, and vulnerable point in the fortifications from a unique aerial perspective. Blending the public spectacle of sport with the private art of surveillance, these agents mastered both the skies and the shadows, their feathered partners serving as unwitting allies in a silent war. But while some spies took to the open air, others found their cover deep within the earth, wielding the tools of sacred construction. Stone and mortar could whisper their secrets to a listening ear. The 11th disguise transformed monastic agents into stonemasons, their hands calloused and their clothes white with dust. Arriving at a cathedral under construction or a castle wall in need of repair, these spies were welcomed not as outsiders but as essential craftsmen. Their skilled labor granted them the ultimate access, allowing them to walk the very battlements and explore the deepest foundations they were meant to one day compromise. With every tap of their chisel and every careful check of their plumb line, they were not just shaping stone, they were conducting a detailed reconnaissance. A mason's tools became perfect instruments of measurement. The length of a chisel pressed against a wall could gauge its thickness. A plumb bob swing could reveal subtle leans or structural weaknesses invisible to the untrained eye. Their work provided the perfect excuse to be everywhere, from the highest turret to the darkest dungeon, mentally cataloging every potential entry point for a future assault. The respect afforded to their craft was their greatest shield. Guards saw only dedicated artisans, not enemies sketching fortifications in their minds. Historical records speak of masons who left behind a subtle, coded language in the very stones they laid. A seemingly random pattern of chisel marks on a cornerstone might indicate a postern gate left unguarded at midnight. A specific arrangement of decorative carvings near a water gate could signal the best approach for a raiding party. They built faith with one hand and gathered intelligence with the other, literally carving history in secret, their true legacy written not in prayer books, but in the vulnerabilities they etched into the enemy's strongest defenses. This mastery over the physical world demonstrated a chilling level of planning, where the very walls meant to protect became a source of peril. Yet another form of infiltration required no tools at all, only a profound understanding of human frailty and the power of a simple, terrifying diagnosis. Sickness could be a more effective weapon than any spy. The 12th disguise saw monastic agents adopt the dreaded role of the plague doctor, a figure whose presence signaled both hope and horror. Clad in the iconic long, dark robe and the beaked mask filled with aromatic herbs to ward off miasma, these spies were granted immediate, unquestioned passage through quarantined cities and fortified camps. The fear of contagion was so absolute that it cleared streets and overrode all standard security protocols. Watchmen would rather face an army than the invisible specter of disease, and they hurried these ominous figures through the gates without inspection. Beneath the waxed robe and behind the glass-eyed mask, the agent was perfectly concealed, his identity and intentions hidden by the universal dread his costume inspired. His supposed medical duties provided the perfect cover for his true mission. Visiting the sick, often in their very homes or in crowded infirmaries, he could move through a community with an authority that brooked no questions. While checking a patient's pulse or applying a poultice, he could observe troop concentrations, the mood of the populace, and the state of public stores. His medical bag, with its vials of tinctures and bundles of herbs, was an ideal hiding place for coded messages or small surveillance tools. there are accounts of these agents using their grim authority to deliberately mislead enemy forces. A plague doctor might diagnose a perfectly healthy but strategically important garrison as being in the early stages of a deadly fever, prompting a panicked commander to isolate his best fighters and cripple his own defensive readiness. By weaponizing the most primal human fear, these spies turned a city's despair into their greatest tactical advantage, proving that sometimes the most powerful disguise was not one that made you invisible, but one that made everyone else too afraid to look. A leper's warning bell created a path through the most vigilant of crowds. This 13th disguise was among the most psychologically daring, as monastic spies deliberately shrouded themselves in the stigma of a terrifying disease. They would wrap their limbs in soiled bandages, smear their skin with substances to mimic sores, and carry the small, dreaded bell that signaled their approach. The sound alone was a key that unlocked every barrier, as watchmen and townsfolk alike recoiled in a mix of pity and pure terror, scrambling to clear a path rather than risk contamination by proximity. This collective revulsion was the agent's greatest weapon, granting him a shocking freedom of movement through crowded marketplaces and past fortified gates without a single question asked. Beneath the layers of grimy cloth, the spy was not a diseased wretch but a keen observer. His eyes, the only feature left exposed, diligently recorded everything, from the number of soldiers on the walls to the arrival of supply carts. Those very bandages served as clever concealment. Wrapped within the cloth against his skin were tiny, oilskin pouches containing maps or coded messages, items no guard would ever dare to search for. The physical and mental fortitude required for this role was staggering. These agents had to endure the genuine isolation and horror their disguise inspired, holding their nerve as people fled from them and children threw stones. Historical records from border regions tell of lepers who would camp just outside a town for weeks, their presence so normalized that they became part of the landscape. Then, after a crucial piece of intelligence was passed or a gate was left unbarred one night, the leper would simply vanish. There are even accounts from confused chroniclers who noted the miraculous recovery of certain outcasts, a disappearance that was not a cure, but the successful conclusion of an audacious mission. By weaponizing society's deepest fears, these spies transformed absolute exclusion into total access. Such a profound understanding of human psychology was not limited to exploiting disease. Another disguise would soon emerge from the hallowed halls of learning, where the weapon was not fear, but fierce and respected intellectual debate. A fiery argument over scripture could be the perfect distraction for a spy. The 14th disguise, that of the disputatious theologian, saw monastic agents weaponize intellectual debate, turning the medieval passion for theological combat into a sophisticated intelligence-gathering tool. These learned men would arrive at a noble court or a bishop's palace, their minds sharpened by years of study, ready to engage the local scholars and commanders in complex arguments about divine grace or the nature of the soul. Their erudition was an immediate passport into the inner circles of power, as educated elites were always eager to test their wits against a formidable opponent. While publicly locked in a passionate, hours-long debate over abstract doctrine, the spy theologian was conducting a very different, very earthly mission. His eyes would discreetly scan the Lord's solar, memorizing the position of doors and windows, or noting a half-unrolled map left carelessly on a table. His flowing academic robes, a symbol of his station, were cleverly tailored with deep, hidden pockets where small, crucial documents could be palmed and secreted away during a dramatic gesture. Historical records from rival courts mention visiting theologians who seemed unusually interested in the architecture of a keep or the comings and goings of messengers, their intellectual fervor masking a meticulous reconnaissance. They blended profound learning with pure subterfuge, using the sound of their own voices to cover the silent theft of a troop roster or the mental recording of a fortress's weak points. This disguise demonstrated that the most effective spy could be the one everyone was intently listening to, his true mission hidden behind a smokescreen of brilliant, distracting rhetoric. Yet for all its intellectual elegance, this method relied on access to the educated few. The next form of infiltration was far more universal, mimicking the one language every lord and watchman understood, the clinking sound of profit. A merchant's ledger could conceal battle plans as easily as trade accounts. The 15th disguise saw monastic spies immerse themselves in the bustling, cosmopolitan world of commerce, posing as traders in wool, wine, or spices. This role provided the perfect excuse for constant travel between rival territories, their carts and pack animals a familiar and welcome sight at any border crossing or castle gate. A merchant with desirable goods was never turned away, his business interests aligning perfectly with the needs of any garrison or town. His very usefulness was his camouflage. While haggling over the price of a bolt of Flemish cloth or a cask of Italian wine, the agent merchant was conducting a thorough assessment of the local situation. He noted the quality of the soldiers' gear, listened for gossip about supply shortages, and gauged the overall morale from the banter in the marketplace. His trade goods were the heart of the deception. Those very barrels and bales were expertly modified with false compartments. A seemingly solid stack of hides might conceal a layer of thin vellum maps between the skins. A barrel of wine could have a watertight chamber in its base, perfect for hiding coded messages or even small, valuable items like uncut gems used to bribe guards. The merchant's constant interaction with officials was another key advantage. To secure trade permits or settle tariffs, he gained regular, sanctioned access to the castle's administrative quarters, places where sensitive documents were often left in plain view. There are accounts of these agent traders deliberately sparking a commotion in a crowded market square, perhaps by accusing a rival merchant of selling faulty goods. As guards rushed to break up the impending brawl, another spy would use the distraction to slip into the keep or pass a message to a contact. By speaking the universal language of commerce, these spies moved through enemy lands not as intruders, but as expected and essential participants in daily life, their true purpose buried deep within their inventories of everyday goods. Even the sale of salvation could serve a hidden purpose. The 16th disguise perfected this art, as monastic spies became merchants of relics, their carts laden with an astonishing array of supposedly holy objects. From splinters of Noah's Ark to feathers from an angel's wing, these agents trafficked in the hopes and superstitions of the age, their pious salesmanship a brilliant cover for espionage. The very act of haggling at a castle gate provided the perfect chaotic theater for their work. While a guard debated the price of a saint's knucklebone, the spy merchant's eyes were busy scanning the battlements, counting the sentries, and memorizing the gatehouse's mechanism. His cart, a rolling treasure chest of faith, was a masterpiece of clandestine engineering. Ornate reliquaries had false backs where maps could be hidden, and seemingly solid wooden statues of saints were cleverly hollowed out to store coded dispatches. This role granted them natural access to the vital arteries of the medieval world, the trade routes. Moving freely from town to town, they blended seamlessly with other merchants, their true mission hidden behind a facade of profit and piety. They gathered more than just military intelligence. Listening to the gossip of the marketplace allowed them to assess the economic health of a region, learning which lords were in debt or which harvests had failed, information as valuable as any troop count. Legends persist of these merchants selling more than just bogus blessings. A purchased indulgence might come with a whispered warning about a corrupt official, or a cheap rosary might be sold with instructions on how to find a hidden message tucked within its beads. They turned the commerce of faith into a covert operation, their profits measured not in coin, but in secrets that could shift the balance of power. This cunning use of human nature and trade routes demonstrated that a spy could operate in plain sight, so long as he offered people exactly what they wanted to believe in. But another form of infiltration required no human interaction at all, instead relying on the silent, patient camouflage of the wild itself. The lonely bleat of a sheep could mask the sound of a counting spy. Disguised as simple shepherds, monastic agents found their perfect cover in the most pastoral of professions, tending flocks that grazed perilously close to contested borders and enemy fortifications. Their peaceful, rural image was a masterstroke of psychological deception. Who would suspect the humble shepherd, a figure as timeless and unchanging as the landscape itself, of harboring a secret agenda? This role allowed them to linger for days, even weeks, in a single location, their presence becoming as normal as the sunrise. While their flock nibbled at the grass, the spy shepherd was conducting a meticulous surveillance of the enemy's rhythm. He noted the precise timing of patrols along the distant walls, the changing of the guard at the main gate, and any unusual comings or goings that might signal an impending movement of troops. His most vital tool, the shepherd's crook, was rarely just a tool for herding. Many were ingeniously modified, with hollowed-out shafts that could conceal a thin, deadly blade or a collapsible spyglass. Some had cleverly weighted ends that, when struck against a rock in a specific pattern, could send coded signals across a valley to a watching compatriot. Historical accounts from border regions describe these agent shepherds deliberately allowing a few sheep to wander toward a forbidden perimeter. This was not an accident but a deliberate test. The response of the guards would reveal everything. Were they vigilant and disciplined, or lazy and inattentive? The speed and manner in which they chased the animals away gave the spy critical insight into the garrison's morale and alertness. This rural disguise offered a patient, panoramic view of the enemy's habits, proving that sometimes the best intelligence was not stolen in a frantic moment, but gathered slowly, blade of grass by blade of grass, under the vast, open sky. From the quiet hillsides, our story now turns to a disguise that echoed through the stone vaults of cathedrals, where sacred music itself became a vessel for secrets. A sacred hymn could carry a command as easily as a prayer. Within the hallowed acoustics of a cathedral or the private chapel of a rival lord, the 16th disguise, that of the Chanting Chorister, transformed divine music into a perfect medium for espionage. These monastic spies, trained from youth in the complex rhythms of Gregorian chant, would join church choirs in enemy territories, their voices blending seamlessly into the soaring polyphony. The universal reverence for liturgical music was their passport, granting them access to the most intimate and powerful spaces, where nobles and commanders gathered for worship, their guards lowered in an atmosphere of supposed sanctity. The continuous, resonant drone of the chant created a unique kind of acoustic cover. Amid the structured waves of sound, a spy could lean subtly toward a fellow chorister and whisper a brief, crucial update on troop movements, the message lost to all but the intended recipient in the enveloping music. Their sheet music, held on sturdy parchment, was often more than it appeared. Between the neat lines of notation, messages were carefully inscribed in invisible ink, becoming legible only when the page was warmed by a candle flame or treated with a specific chemical. A chorister could openly carry these scores anywhere, their true nature hidden in plain sight. Their role as observers was equally vital. Standing in the choir loft, they had a commanding view of the entire congregation. They noted which nobles were absent from a crucial service, suggesting political disfavor or a secret mission elsewhere. They listened intently to the hushed conversations that took place before and after the Mass, catching fragments of strategy and gossip that were freely exchanged in the house of God. Some historical accounts describe choristers using specific musical cues as signals. A particular emphasis on a certain note during a hymn might alert an ally in the pews that a message was waiting in a dead drop, or that a gate would be unguarded at midnight. They harmonized devotion with deception, their pious performances providing the soundtrack for clandestine operations that unfolded in the very shadow of the altar. This use of sacred space showed a breathtaking audacity, turning the most trusted rituals into instruments of intelligence. From the soaring heights of the choir loft, our journey now descends into the silent, cold realm of the dead, where another form of cover awaited, one that exploited the ultimate human taboo. Death itself could be turned into a shield. The 17th disguise, that of the corpse bearer, saw monastic spies embrace the grim but essential duty of handling the dead during times of plague or in the aftermath of battle. Clad in somber, hooded robes and their faces often masked against the stench, these agents moved through a landscape of grief and fear with a solemn authority that few dared to challenge. Watchmen stationed at city gates or camp perimeters were deeply superstitious and terrified of contagion, making them profoundly reluctant to inspect the coffins these men transported. A simple, heavy wooden casket carried with funereal dignity was the perfect container for deception. Inside, nestled beside a body or sometimes in place of one, could be a fugitive noble, a bundle of stolen battle plans, or even carefully wrapped weapons for an uprising. The bearer's sacred duty provided the perfect cover for reconnaissance. While performing funeral rites at a remote graveyard or a pestilence pit outside the city walls, the spy was also scouting the terrain. He noted the condition of the roads, the defensibility of a hilltop, or the best hidden approaches to a fortress, all under the guise of selecting a final resting place. The emotional and physical fortitude required for this role was immense. These agents had to maintain their composure while surrounded by death and despair, their performance of compassion making their deception utterly convincing. Historical records from besieged cities mention corpse bearers who were given unusually wide latitude to move between the lines, as both sides had a vested interest in disposing of the dead to prevent disease. There are chilling accounts of these agents who would secretly bury intelligence along with the deceased, tucking a tiny, oilskin-wrapped message beneath the shroud of a body destined for a crypt inside an enemy-held church, to be retrieved later by a sympathetic sexton. By weaponizing the universal taboos surrounding mortality, these spies operated in the most plain sight of all, their grim cargo ensuring their passage through a world too frightened to look closely. From the silence of the grave, we now turn to a disguise that thrived in the noisy, vibrant heart of medieval scholarship, where the weapon was not fear, but the relentless pursuit of knowledge. A dusty manuscript could hide a battle plan between its vellum leaves. The 18th disguise saw monastic spies adopt the scholarly mantle of the Manuscript Collector, their passion for ancient texts providing unparalleled access to the enemy's most guarded knowledge hubs. Arriving at a rival monastery's library or a noble's private scriptorium, these agents were welcomed as fellow intellectuals, their presence celebrated rather than scrutinized. They would spend days, even weeks, hunched over priceless codices, their fingers tracing illuminated letters while their minds worked on a far more clandestine task. The very tools of their trade were instruments of espionage. A pot of ink might contain two separate compartments, one for standard black and another for a secret, invisible ink. Their delicate scraping knives, used to gently clean old parchment, could also be employed to carefully lift the wax seals from sensitive documents, allowing them to be read and then resealed without a trace. Their deep knowledge of script and illumination was their greatest weapon. While publicly marveling at the beauty of a 9th-century psalter, a spy might be secretly copying a detailed map of the local coastline from a stolen maritime chart, replicating it on a thin sheet of vellum concealed within his own notebook. The prolonged, sanctioned nature of their research was key to their success. A collector required peace, quiet, and solitude, conditions that allowed him to work unobserved in the very rooms where strategic documents were stored. There are documented cases of these agent scholars who famously donated expertly forged manuscripts to enemy libraries. One such forgery might be a fabricated historical chronicle that subtly undermined a lord's claim to a disputed territory, while another could be a deliberately flawed map that would lead an invading army into a swamp or an ambush. They moved through the world of letters not as destroyers but as preservers, yet their work ensured that the history they helped to curate would be written to their advantage. This intellectual infiltration demonstrated that the pen could indeed be mightier than the sword, especially when the hand that held it was secretly sketching fortifications. From the quiet of the scriptorium, our attention now shifts to a disguise that required a different kind of performance, one that turned a physical limitation into a strategic advantage. A blind man's helpless gaze disarmed even the most hardened watchman. Feigning blindness was a psychological masterstroke, transforming the spy into an object of pity rather than suspicion. These agents would sit by city gates or shuffle through crowded marketplaces, their eyes vacant and unseeing, their hands trembling as they held out a wooden bowl for alms. Guards, moved by a combination of compassion and a desire to quickly move the unfortunate soul along, would often personally guide the blind beggar through checkpoints, bypassing any thorough search of his person. His apparent helplessness was his ultimate weapon, allowing him to linger in strategic locations and eavesdrop on conversations, as people spoke freely around someone they believed could not comprehend or remember their words. The tools of his disability were cleverly modified instruments of espionage. His simple walking cane, a symbol of his vulnerability, was often a sealed tube of finely crafted metal or hardened wood, its hollow core containing a tightly rolled vellum map or a slender, deadly stiletto dagger. This disguise demanded impeccable acting skills and a formidable memory, as the agent had to convincingly navigate the world without sight while mentally recording every overheard detail, from troop numbers to supply routes for later transcription. Historical accounts from several chronicles note with bafflement the occasional miraculous recovery of a blind beggar who would simply vanish from his usual spot, a disappearance that coincided with a critical shift in local military fortunes. By leveraging universal human empathy, these monastic spies performed a brilliant inversion, turning perceived weakness into unparalleled strategic strength. While some spies exploited human compassion, others found their perfect cover in the relentless physical rhythm of farm labor. A farmer's sunburned skin and calloused hands were badges of honest toil that invited no scrutiny. Monastic agents who adopted this role would work the fields bordering enemy territories, their daily routine of plowing, sowing, and harvesting providing a legitimate reason for their constant presence in a contested landscape. Who would suspect the man guiding an ox through the mud of being a master of observation? His labor was a continuous surveillance operation. The slow, methodical pace of plowing a furrow allowed him to visually trace the entire perimeter of a distant fortress, noting any new construction or changes in guard patterns. The simple farm cart, laden with hay or turnips, was a masterclass in clandestine design. A false bottom beneath a load of vegetables could conceal a fugitive or a cache of weapons, while the thick, layered sheaves of grain offered perfect hiding spots for scrolls and messages. The farmer's intimate knowledge of the land was another key advantage. He knew every hidden deer path through the woods, every shallow ford across a river, and every secluded hollow that could conceal a raiding party. There are documented cases of these agent farmers using their agricultural work to send signals. A specific pattern of stacked hay bales in a field might indicate the safe passage of a spy through the area, while a plowed field left in a particular, unusual pattern could warn of enemy patrols on the move. They blended with the very earth they tended, their true mission growing in secret like a hidden seed, ready to bear fruit at the decisive moment. The slow, rhythmic work of a vineyard offered its own kind of secrecy. Monastic spies who became vineyard laborers found that the endless rows of grapevines provided both camouflage and a perfect vantage point. Their days were spent in the sun, pruning and harvesting, their bodies taking on the same weathered, robust look as the local workers. This physical transformation was so complete that they became indistinguishable from the rural population, their presence on the slopes near a castle or a major road raising no alarm. It was a disguise built on sweat and the seasons. Their simple farming tools were far from innocent. A pruning knife's sturdy handle could be unscrewed to reveal a hollow compartment for a tiny, coded message. The pointed end of a digging spade was perfect for scratching subtle directional arrows onto stones or for digging small, hidden caches in the earth where intelligence could be left for another agent to retrieve. Their work gave them a legitimate reason to observe everything. A vineyard was often planted on prized, sunny hillsides that overlooked vital supply routes and river crossings. While tending the grapes, a spy could note the frequency and size of supply convoys, the types of goods being transported, and the guard complement, all while appearing completely absorbed in his labor. The harvest time itself was a period of intense strategic importance, as the success or failure of the grape crop could dictate a lord's financial ability to wage war, information as valuable as any troop count. Legends from wine-growing regions tell of these agent laborers who did more than just gather information. There are tales of them subtly pruning in a more dangerous sense, using their intimate knowledge of the land to locate and sever the buried messenger cables or signal lines that connected an enemy fortress to its outlying garrisons. They cultivated both crops and intelligence, their hands stained not just with grape juice, but with the secrets they patiently reaped from the soil. This deep integration into the land itself showed that the most effective spy was sometimes the one who seemed to have sprung directly from the earth he worked. But while some spies found their cover in the physical world of agriculture, others operated in the deeply personal realm of faith, wielding the power of spiritual guidance as their ultimate tool. The whispered secrets of the confessional booth held more than just sins. As confessors, monastic spies wielded a sacred authority that gave them access to the most private fears and loyalties of soldiers and nobles. A knight kneeling in penance might speak of his anxieties about an upcoming campaign, revealing the exact number of lances in his company or the poor morale within his lord's ranks. A minor court official, burdened by guilt, could divulge details of a secret treaty or the location of a hidden treasury, all under the assumption of absolute clerical confidentiality. These spies operated in a profound ethical gray area, justifying their breach of the sacramental seal with the higher cause of state security. They listened with a priest's compassionate ear, but remembered with a spy's meticulous mind, cataloging every piece of information as they offered words of absolution. Chronicles from the period hint at confessors who cleverly shaped their spiritual counsel to serve espionage goals. A priest might assign a guilt-ridden guard the seemingly benign penance of walking the entire perimeter of the castle walls each night to pray for his soul. This holy instruction conveniently ensured the spy received a daily, detailed report on the fortress's defensive readiness from the very man tasked with protecting it. By blending sacrament with strategy, these agents turned a ritual of repentance into one of the most intimate and devastating forms of reconnaissance, proving that the soul was often the easiest fortress to breach. After exploiting the deepest vulnerabilities of the human spirit, another form of disguise found its power in the silent, instinctual world of animals, where a simple hound could become an unwitting accomplice. A dancing bear could draw every eye while a spy's hands worked unseen. The 22nd disguise saw monastic agents embrace the chaotic world of the beast handler, traveling with itinerant carnivals or attaching themselves to noble courts as exotic entertainers. Their fearsome or amusing animals, from lumbering bears to clever monkeys, were the ultimate distraction, while a crowd, including the most vigilant watchmen, was utterly captivated by the spectacle of a beast performing tricks. The handler was free to conduct his true business. He could observe the layout of a castle courtyard, count the weapons in an armory, or even palm a small, valuable item from a distracted noble's table, all while the audience's attention was locked on his animal partner. These creatures were more than just a diversion. They were active participants in the espionage. A well-trained monkey, small and agile, could be sent scrambling up a wall to retrieve a tiny message capsule left on a specific windowsill. A dog could learn to carry a small, hollowed-out ball containing intelligence strapped discreetly to its collar, passing through areas where a human courier would be stopped and searched. The mobility this disguise provided was unparalleled. A beast handler and his troop were welcome everywhere, from the lowest village fair to the highest lord's feast, granting the spy access to every layer of society and a legitimate reason to be on the road constantly. There are numerous reports from castle guards describing the chaos that ensued when a handler's animal supposedly escaped its leash during a routine gate inspection. While soldiers dropped their spears and scrambled to recapture a panicked bear or a chattering monkey, a second agent, or perhaps the handler himself, would use the pandemonium to slip through an unguarded postern gate or plant a listening device in the guardhouse. They tamed both creatures and men, their public performances of skill masking a far more dangerous private performance of deception. This mastery over nature and human attention demonstrated a profound understanding of misdirection, where the most obvious spectacle in the room was merely the backdrop for the real show happening in the shadows. Such cunning use of public performance found a very different expression in a disguise that traded the carnival's noise for the solemn, echoing quiet of sacred stone. A pilgrimage guide staff pointed the way toward both salvation and surveillance. This final, 23rd disguise saw monastic spies become shepherds of the faithful, their authority over a group of pilgrims granting them immense freedom of movement through the most contested land. They were entrusted with the souls and safety of their flock, a sacred responsibility that masked a far more worldly mission. These agent guides did not simply lead travelers to a holy shrine. They expertly orchestrated the entire journey to serve the needs of espionage. Their most powerful tool was the route itself. Publicly, they would choose paths based on the availability of clean water or the sanctity of a particular stopping point. Privately, their decisions were strategic, deliberately steering their charges along roads that skirted enemy patrols or climbed hills that offered commanding views of a rival's fortress. A guide might insist the group stop for midday prayers on a specific windswept hilltop, a pause that allowed him to discreetly count the number of tents in a distant military camp or sketch the layout of a bridge from a concealed vantage point. The maps they carried were marvels of dual-purpose cartography. On the surface, they showed the familiar network of pilgrim roads and hostels. but when held to the light or treated with a specific chemical wash, a hidden layer would appear, revealing the locations of watchtowers, garrison strengths, and secret paths known only to local shepherds. Historical records mention guides who were famous for their uncanny knowledge of the land, an expertise that sometimes led them to deliberately lose their way. This was no navigational error, but a calculated detour. While the pilgrims grumbled about the extra miles, the guide was scouting a previously unknown mountain pass or confirming the rumored location of a new enemy outpost, his pious charges serving as the perfect, unwitting cover for his reconnaissance. He led his followers with one hand while gathering the threads of intelligence with the other, his voice chanting prayers even as his eyes recorded every tactical detail. In the end, these 23 disguises reveal a world where faith and secrecy were woven into a single, unbreakable thread. From the humble pilgrim to the cunning guide, these monastic agents proved that the most powerful deception was not about becoming someone else, but about perfecting a role so completely that no one ever thought to question it. They moved through a violent age not by force of arms, but by force of character, their greatest weapon a simple, devastating truth that people will always see what they expect to see. This seamless fusion of devotion and deceit created an unbreachable form of cover. The monastic spy did not merely wear a robe, he inhabited a role so deeply embedded in the fabric of medieval life that his true purpose became invisible. His piety was not a mask but a weaponized identity, allowing him to manipulate the very trust his station was meant to embody. He could stand in a rival lord's chapel, hearing confessions that revealed military weaknesses, all while believing his higher purpose sanctified the betrayal of the confessional seal. This was the ultimate moral compromise where the ends were argued to justify nearly any means. How do we judge these men who broke their most sacred vows in service to a king or a pope? Their legacy is a complex tapestry woven with threads of unwavering faith and calculated falsehood. The strategies they perfected, from the pilgrim's humble observation to the plague doctor's weaponized fear, established core principles of espionage that are still in use today. Modern intelligence agencies still rely on creating believable, deep cover identities that exploit societal expectations and inherent trust. The concept of hiding in plain sight, of using what people expect to see against them, was mastered in the cloisters and on the roads of the Middle Ages. These 23 bizarre disguises are more than just historical curiosities. They are a testament to the timeless power of human ingenuity in the shadowy art of information warfare. From mendicant pilgrims to beast handlers, the 23 disguises we have explored showcase an incredible spectrum of creativity and raw bravery. These monastic agents perfected the art of blending in, transforming their very vows of poverty and piety into razor-sharp weapons against enemy watchfulness. Their true legacy is a powerful reminder that throughout history, intelligence has often triumphed through clever wit rather than sheer warfare. The principles they pioneered, from hiding in plain sight to weaponizing human trust, echo profoundly in our modern world. Today's security experts and intelligence agencies still study these ancient methods, adapting the core ideas of deep cover identities and psychological misdirection for a new era. As we close this chapter on medieval espionage, consider which of these bizarre disguises amazed you the most. Was it the leper who weaponized fear, or the scribe whose quill was mightier than any sword? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if your curiosity for these hidden histories is now burning bright, subscribe for more journeys into the past. Thank you for watching, and may your own path of discovery always be filled with fascinating secrets.